You're sitting in your car in the driveway, and you've been here for 11 minutes. The engine is off. Your phone is face down on the passenger seat. You told yourself you were just going to sit here for a second before going inside, but now your hands are still on the steering wheel, and you're staring at nothing in particular. And there's this feeling in your chest that doesn't have a name yet. It's not panic. It's not sadness, exactly. It's more like the feeling of standing at the edge of something you can't see the bottom of, knowing that once you step away, the ground behind you disappears too. You've been here before, in this exact emotional place, maybe 100 times, but this time something is different. This time, you're not trying to talk yourself back into it. You're not rehearsing what you'll say to make it better, or wondering what you did wrong, or figuring out how to be smaller, quieter, more acceptable. This time, you're just sitting with the truth that you've been avoiding for longer than you can measure. The truth is that you can't keep doing this and still be a person who gets to have a life. It's strange how something so enormous can feel so quiet. You always thought that if you ever reached this point, it would be loud, definitive, maybe even dramatic. You thought there would be a final betrayal, a last straw, something so undeniable that no one could question your decision. But that's not how it happens for most people. Most people don't cut off their family because of one catastrophic event. They do it because they finally stop being able to pretend that the pain is normal. They do it because their body starts refusing to cooperate with the performance anymore. They do it because one day they realize that the version of themselves they have to become in order to stay connected isn't actually them at all. And they're tired of spending their entire life trying to earn safety in a place that was never designed to give it to them. And even now, sitting here, you feel the pull of guilt before you feel anything else. That's the first thing people don't understand when they haven't lived it. The guilt arrives before the relief. It arrives before the clarity. It arrives before you've even finished the thought. And it tells you that you're selfish, that you're cruel, that you're abandoning people who need you, that you're breaking something sacred. The guilt is so loud and so old that it feels like your own voice, but it isn't. It's the voice of every system you grew up inside that taught you that your worth was measured by your ability to keep the peace, absorb the pain, and never, ever walk away. It's the voice of a culture that tells you family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, that you only get one mother, one father, that forgiveness is mandatory and boundaries are just a gentler word for rejection. But here's what that voice doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you that love isn't supposed to cost you your sanity. It doesn't tell you that loyalty isn't supposed to mean erasing yourself. It doesn't tell you that some family systems are built on the invisible labor of one person absorbing everyone else's dysfunction so the family can pretend to be fine. And it doesn't tell you that for some people, leaving isn't about anger or revenge or giving up. It's about choosing to stop slowly disappearing. You probably spent years trying to fix it first. Years trying to explain yourself more clearly. Trying to set boundaries that were immediately ignored or punished. Trying to be good enough that maybe this time they'd see you. You went to therapy and learned the language of healthy relationships and came back hoping that if you just communicated better, if you just stayed calm, if you just stopped being so sensitive, things would change. And maybe they did change, for a week, or a day, or an hour. And you felt that flicker of hope that maybe this time it would stick. But it never did. Because the problem was never your communication style. The problem was that you were trying to have an adult relationship with people who needed you to stay small. You were trying to be seen by people who could only survive if you remained invisible. There's a concept in psychology called an enmeshed family system, and it describes families where there are no clear boundaries between people, where one person's emotions become everyone's responsibility, where independence is treated as betrayal, and where love is conditional on compliance. In these systems, you don't get to be a separate person. You get to be a role, the caretaker, the scapegoat, the golden child, the mediator, the emotional support system for people who never learned how to regulate themselves. And the role is so totalizing, so relentless, that you don't even realize you're performing it until one day you try to stop and the entire system destabilizes. That's when you learn that your family doesn't just want you. They need you to stay in the role, because without it, they'd have to face themselves. And you tried to leave before, maybe. Or you tried to create distance. You moved to another city, or you stopped answering every phone call, or you started saying no to things. And the response was immediate. The guilt trips, the accusations, the silent treatment, the sudden crisis that required your presence. The way they'd oscillate between rage and victimhood, between telling you you're overreacting and telling you you're destroying the family. This is what trauma bonding looks like in a family system. It's the cycle of harm and repair, explosion and apology, cruelty and tenderness, that keeps you locked in a loop where you never feel safe, but you also never feel free to leave. Because every time you try, they pull you back. Not with love exactly, but with need, with crisis, with the promise that this time will be different, that they understand now, that they'll change. And you want so badly to believe it, that you override every warning sign your body is giving you, and you go back. And for a little while, it's okay. And then it isn't. And the cycle starts again. Your nervous system learns to live in this cycle. It learns to be hypervigilant, always scanning for danger, always braced for the next explosion. It learns to fawn, to please, to make yourself small and agreeable so maybe you won't be the target this time. It learns that your needs are negotiable, but their comfort is mandatory. And over time, this doesn't just become a strategy. It becomes your baseline. You stop being able to tell the difference between anxiety and normalcy. You stop being able to trust your own perceptions because you've been told so many times that you're too sensitive, that you're remembering it wrong, that it wasn't that bad, that you're making a big deal out of nothing. And so you start to doubt yourself, even when your body is screaming that something is wrong. This is what makes leaving so hard. It's not just about missing them or feeling sad. It's about having to untangle yourself from a reality that was constructed around their needs, their version of events, their emotional stability. It's about realizing that you've spent so much of your life trying to manage their feelings that you don't actually know what yours are anymore. And when you finally do create distance, when you finally say, "I can't do this anymore," the hardest part isn't their reaction. The hardest part is the absence of the role you've been playing your entire life. The hardest part is learning how to exist without the script. And they'll tell you they don't understand. They'll say you're cutting them off for no reason, that they have no idea what they did, that you're being cruel and unfair. And this will make you feel insane, because you've told them 100 times, in 100 different ways. You've told them calmly, and you've told them through tears, and you've told them in letters and in therapy sessions and in desperate late-night conversations where you begged them to just hear you. But they didn't, because hearing you would have required them to see themselves, and that was never something they were capable of. So instead, they rewrote the story. They minimized what happened. They reframed your pain as your problem. They made themselves the victim of your boundaries. And now, in their version of events, you're the one who left without explanation, without cause, without justification. This is what psychologists call an identity threat. When you confront someone with information that challenges their self-concept, their brain doesn't process it as new information. It processes it as an attack. And the more fragile their self-concept, the more intense the defense. So when you tell a parent who sees themselves as loving and devoted that they were actually harmful, their brain can't integrate that. It can't hold both truths at once, and so it discards your truth to protect theirs. They're not lying, exactly. They genuinely don't remember it the way you do, because remembering it accurately would shatter the story they've built about who they are. And you can't make someone remember what they've spent their whole life forgetting. So you stop trying. Not because you don't care, but because you finally understand that your healing can't wait for their awakening. And this is where the grief comes in. And it's a strange kind of grief, because the person is still alive. You're not mourning someone who died. You're mourning the parent you needed and never had. You're mourning the version of them you kept hoping would appear if you just tried hard enough. You're mourning the fantasy of what family was supposed to mean. And you're mourning the part of yourself that still wants to go back, that still believes maybe it could be different, that still feels like maybe you're the one who's wrong. This is called ambiguous loss, and it's uniquely painful because there's no closure, no funeral, no cultural script for how to grieve someone who's still living but no longer in your life. People don't know what to say to you. They ask if you've tried talking to them, as if you haven't spent decades trying. They tell you life is short, that you'll regret it, that family is family. They don't understand that you've already done the cost-benefit analysis 1,000 times, and every time, the cost of staying was your own life. And then one day, maybe weeks or months after you've created the distance, you notice something. You notice that your shoulders aren't up around your ears anymore. You notice that you're sleeping through the night. You notice that you don't feel that sense of dread when your phone rings. You notice that you can make plans without wondering if you'll have to cancel them because of someone else's crisis. You notice that you're laughing more easily, that you're not replaying conversations in your head trying to figure out what you did wrong, that you're not walking on eggshells in your own life anymore. And this relief feels so good and so wrong at the same time, because how can you feel better when you've just done something that you were told your whole life was unforgivable? But here's the truth that no one tells you until you live it. Relief and grief can exist in the same body. You can miss someone and know that you can't be around them. You can love someone and understand that their presence in your life is destructive. You can honor what they gave you and still acknowledge what they took. And none of that makes you a bad person. It makes you someone who finally chose themselves. And that's not selfish. That's survival. Your nervous system knows this, even if your mind doesn't yet. When you're finally out of a chronically stressful environment, your body starts to come back online. The part of you that's been in survival mode for years starts to relax. You start to access parts of yourself that were shut down because they weren't safe to feel. You start to realize how much energy you were spending just managing the relationship, and now that energy is yours again. This is what nervous system regulation feels like. It's not fireworks. It's quiet. It's the ability to sit in your car without feeling like the walls are closing in. It's the ability to have a Saturday with no plans and not feel guilty. It's the ability to say no without spending 3 days recovering from the anxiety of it. And slowly, without even realizing it, you start to build a life that isn't organized around their needs. You start to make choices based on what you actually want, not what will keep the peace. You start to notice what you like, what you value, what makes you feel alive. You start to realize that you don't have to earn your right to exist. You start to understand that the version of love you were taught, the one that required self-erasure and constant vigilance and endless forgiveness without accountability, wasn't love. It was control. And you don't have to accept that anymore. This doesn't mean it stops hurting. It doesn't mean you don't have moments where you wonder if you made the right choice, where you miss the good parts, where you feel the pull to reach out and try again. But those moments get smaller. They get less frequent. And eventually, you start to trust that the distance isn't cruelty. It's care. It's the most compassionate thing you could do for both of you, because pretending wasn't helping anyone. It was just keeping everyone stuck in a story that didn't have room for the truth. Some people will never understand this. They'll think you're cold, that you're holding a grudge, that you should just get over it, and that's okay. You're not doing this for their approval. You're doing this because you finally realize that your life is yours, and you don't have to spend it trying to fix something that was broken long before you got here. You're doing this because you deserve to be in relationships where you don't have to beg to be treated with basic respect. You're doing this because you finally understood that leaving wasn't about punishing them, it was about freeing yourself. And maybe, in the quiet moments, you'll feel something unexpected, not regret, but tenderness. Tenderness for the child you were who tried so hard to be good enough. Tenderness for the adult you became, who kept trying long past the point where most people would have walked away. Tenderness for the version of you that's sitting in this car right now, finally giving yourself permission to stop. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know if this is forever or just for now. You just have to trust that choosing yourself, after a lifetime of not being allowed to, is the most radical act of love you've ever committed. And it's enough. You're enough. And you don't need anyone's permission to believe that anymore.